So sisters, inshallah, you're more than welcome to come. You can join us, inshallah, in my right hand side. Sister, inshallah, you are more than welcome to come in main prayer hall. We are starting in a minute, inshallah.
Ready? You live? Oh, you can flip that. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad. Allahumma barak ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad. Alhamdulillah. We're very grateful and pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because tonight we have representatives from CARE to tell us about speaking truth to power. We have Brother John Floyd, who is on the board of directors for CARE, and we have Brother Imran Ghani, who is the director of Houston operations for CARE. So very high-powered individuals we have here tonight. Jazakumullah khair to all of you for showing up. We really appreciate it. And so I humbly invite the sisters to please do come on over. You're very welcome to come over. Jazakumullah khair. With that, I'll hand it over to you guys. So, Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Sayyidina wa nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Rabbana atina min ladunka rahmah wa hayyi' lana min amrina rashada. It's wonderful to be in such good company, and thank you to the Masjid AlSalam community for inviting us and sharing what some of the important work that we do on behalf of the Muslim community. How many of you have heard of CARE before? Okay, so good amount of awareness. As for the people that have not heard about CARE, inshallah there's a good amount of information for you to learn from. So I'm the newly hired CARE director for Houston, Texas, and with me is my colleague, Mr. John Floyd, so I'll have him introduce himself as well.
Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullah. Brothers and sisters, I'm your brother John Floyd. For those of you who don't know me, I am a criminal defense attorney by day. I'm board certified in criminal law. That's what I do for my living. I've been volunteering with CARE for over 20 years as a volunteer pro bono civil rights lawyer. I accepted Islam in 1994 and have been on this amazing journey ever since. I'm really looking forward to having this discussion with you tonight because we are in a time of concern. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of things being said about our community that are not true. There's a lot of attacks on our community that are unfounded. And so part of the first step in moving forward and gaining power is to be educated about your civil rights and to understand how to exercise those rights. So, inshallah, tonight we will be presenting a new program. CARE has a bucket of programs. We have 5 or 6 different programs. Each one of them could last an hour. Know your rights when you're an employee, knowing your rights when you're a student, knowing your rights when you travel, knowing your rights when you're approached by law enforcement. We have many different, know your rights when you're at work, all these different programs that we can put on. And we're always willing to come back and do other presentations in greater lengths. But tonight, we're going to have a very special event because we're welcoming our dear brother, Imran Ghani, to the organization. Be gentle with him. This is one of his first Know Your Rights presentations, and I'm really proud to be sitting next to him. This is your first one. So if you see me pinching him or prodding him, there's a reason for that because we're in a learning opportunity. As part of this, not only is this his first presentation, but he's decided to craft a brand new PowerPoint presentation on top of that. So we're all learning together, and so please bear with us. And with no further ado, we'll get moving, inshallah.
Inshallah. So I want to start by first setting the frame for our conversation. So what is CARE? CARE is an acronym for the Council on American Islamic Relations. And our vision is to be a leading advocate for justice and mutual understanding. Our mission is to enhance understanding of Islam, protect civil rights, promote justice, and empower American Muslims. What does this look like out in the field? This looks like CARE is out there in front of the media, correcting the narrative and speaking truth to power when we are being misrepresented in the media. Moreover, anytime our rights as a community are being trampled upon based on race, gender, ethnicity, and religion, and even disabilities, we stand up and offer with our attorneys pro bono services for our community members who don't have the resources to do so themselves. And so for the frame today, in empowering you all in knowing your rights, the issue that I want to address as Muslims is to have fear of Allah and Allah alone. To have fear of Allah and not the creation. In reality, the setting or the atmosphere of xenophobia that we find ourselves in, that many of you remember post 9/11 and before that in the Gulf War era, in the Vietnam era, the during the period of McCarthyism, there are cycles of fear in which, in order to, in my opinion, in order to distract people from the real issues, there needs to be a scapegoat. And right now, it's the Muslims, it's various other groups as well. But there's no need to be afraid of the creation, because as believers, having taqwa entails not just having fear of Allah, but having fear of Allah alone. So know your rights as a way to empower yourself and to not have fear of anyone but Allah. So there's 3 major buckets of complaints and cases that we get in the CARE Houston office. Discrimination in schools, discrimination with law enforcement, and discrimination while traveling. Another 4th bucket is discrimination in the workplace, but for the purposes of time, we're going to do the first 3 buckets. And then we're going to go through scenarios. We're going to have Brother John give some expert, nuanced advice about how some of these scenarios play out in the Houston area, and then we'll open up the floor for questions, inshallah, for the final 15 minutes. All right, so first of all, a disclaimer that this presentation is not legal advice, so we can't answer specific questions about your particular situation. consult a local chapter, meaning us, for an intake if you have a complaint or discrimination that you wish to report. This QR code, if you want to scan it, inshallah we'll send it out to the community as well. It's to the Care Houston website, and you'll find our phone number. But anytime you will have to submit a complaint or you know someone, direct them to our website. It's very easy to get in touch with us through our phone number, through our website. We have translation services for those who don't speak English, for Urdu, Arabic, Pashto, Somali, and lots of other languages that we can get a hold of, inshallah. All right, so know your rights in school, in the education setting. So situation number 1, this module is to right to dress accommodations, but it also applies in situations of right to have a beard in schools, and it also applies in the workplace. So the scenario is that on the first day of school, a teacher pulled Alia off to side and saying that the school had a no hats policy. She needed to remove it until she could provide a note. So the sister says, I wear this scarf for religious purposes, so I will keep it on. And the teacher says, thanks for explaining your reasoning. I understand, but please bring in a note by tomorrow to continue wearing it. And in this scenario, if she doesn't bring a note by tomorrow, then there's pressure being applied on the student that she cannot wear the hijab. In similar scenarios where a student is growing a beard for religious reasons, similar pressure is applied on students, and when they don't know their rights, then they get into issues around whether or not they can do it. So the review of the rights that must be asserted in these kinds of situations.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So one of the things I want to start with is that most of the advice that you're seeing here applies to students who are in public schools. Okay, so public schools, since they're federally funded, have to adhere to a certain set of constitutional rights, and that applies to the students, right? So if your child is going to a public school, they have a right to reasonable accommodations for sincerely held religious beliefs, okay? So what that means is that, in the example we saw, that you have a right to wear your religious attire. That applies to the hijab, kufi, abaya. We actually saw a case just like this out of Pearland. There was a anti-Muslim person who was the superintendent of the school district in Pearland. And he actually created this policy saying that no one could wear hijab on the school anywhere in the district without a note from their priest, is what he put in his rules. Of course, the sister was 12, 13 years old. This was very embarrassing to her, very upsetting. She told her parents. Her parents called CARE. At the time, it was Mustafa Carroll who was in town. He and I went down and sat in the superintendent's office for about an hour until he finally knew we weren't leaving and agreed to speak to us. We explained to him he was violating the Constitution. And the next day, the policy was reversed. And it was because we were there and because the parents knew to contact CARE. So it's very important to understand your rights so that you can assert them, right? What else do we have? So reasonable accommodations apply to everyone in the school district. So for example, if there's a school dress code, right? Your child will still have to wear the dress code with the exception of articles of faith which are based on sincerely held religious beliefs. And so a sister, for example, would still have to comply with the dress code, but could wear hijab and appropriate clothing. Number 3 on the screen is that knowing these things doesn't do any good unless you assert them, right? And so to assert them, it's important that we educate our children before they begin school, remind them occasionally that these are their constitutional rights. They're protected. There's a whole line of cases going all the way back through the civil rights era, which has enshrined these accommodations And we should be proud of these rights. You know, there was the black community in the civil rights era literally lost blood and lives exercising these rights and getting these rights enshrined in the law. And so we should stand on those shoulders and be proud to assert those rights. There is a fourth point here, is it is always a good idea to be proactive as a parent also. As Muslims, we believe in being polite and using the correct etiquette. Part of that is not waiting until there's a problem and then being upset. It's always a good idea, if you see something coming up, to sit down and talk to your teachers, send a note to the school. For example, during Ramadan, we have many athletes who are fasting, right? So it's good to notify the school in advance that your child will be fasting, and to request what other reasonable accommodations may come with that. So part of this exercise is, number one, knowing your rights. Number two, in knowing how to express them in a professional way. Number three is that if you get to the point that you're not getting the impact that you want, that you're not being respected, you contact care, and then we can pick it up from there. Okay? So you can move to the next one.
Yeah, and John and I were talking before this presentation, and in our experience, we see that a lot of times Muslims in the community know their rights, but when put in the situation, that we tend to crumple. And my explanation to this is that maybe a lot of us come from immigrant backgrounds where there isn't this context of being able to assert your rights without fear of being thrown into prison. This is not the situation in the US, where you can, with confidence and respect, assert your freedom of religion and then advocate to get it into the level of policy and then eventually into law. So there isn't, and again, going back to this idea of being fearful only of Allah and not of creation. So another scenario that comes up often is the right to prayer accommodations, especially in this time of year when students don't come back home and it's Asr time by the time they get home. For those students that Dhuhr becomes mandatory, then this is a valid religious right to claim during school hours. So Sister Alia asks, where's the salam? I don't know. As-salamu alaikum. Is there a place to pray on campus? And the student says, there was not one that I'm aware of, since the school denied me and other Muslims a place to pray last year. So Ahmed and Alia agreed to go to the administrator after school that day to request a space for performing prayers. So the sister says, as Muslims, we must pray 5 times a day. 2 of the prayer times fall within school hours. We need a clean, quiet place to pray on campus. The administrator responds, we talked about this last year. If I give you a space, then I must provide everyone else with a space. I cannot guarantee I can make it happen. Sorry. I'll see what I can do by the, Sister Alia says the school provides other groups with space on campus to sing, play cards, and play chess. We only want a place to pray for 10 minutes a day. Administrator responds, I'll see what I can do by the end of the day tomorrow.
So, subhanAllah, Ali is a very smart young lady, as we see. Again, under the Constitution of the United States, the public schools are required to provide reasonable accommodations for sincerely held religious beliefs, including prayer, okay? So what that looks like is students who choose or who need to pray during the day need to be given reasonable accommodations to do that. We've had school districts all over the region who have begun adjusting to this accommodation. We've had to go half a dozen school districts across the area and explain this to them. And once they understand, they'll ask their attorneys to go and look it up. And sure enough, they have to provide reasonable accommodations. What that means is that they need to provide accommodations that are reasonable, meaning that are not disruptive to the other students. And they need to provide a place that is set aside so that people can go and do their prayers and then return without causing any issues. One of the things that I would encourage you is, as your students are going through this, it is important that they also understand their responsibilities as part of this religious accommodation. We have seen some of our students, when they get the accommodation, it becomes like a recess. And things can get out of control, and then we can actually lose some of those accommodations. So the most important thing is to make sure that the students are organized, that they know their rights, and that they are respectful of others when they're going about their prayers. If they do that, and it can be done without interfering with the other student studies, that's a reasonable accommodation that the school has to make, okay? And the slide says students may organize prayer groups to the same extent that students are permitted to organize other groups. This applies to the MSAs that we're seeing that are in high schools, and even some that are now starting up in middle schools. The school cannot deny an MSA to form on campus if it allows other organizations to have clubs. You'll still have to follow the same rules, right? You'll have to find a teacher who will administer the club and follow the other rules, but they cannot deny the MSAs the right to organize on campus and to have events just like all the other groups, okay? As I said before, this is something that we should do respectfully and appropriate as Muslims. And we, of course, when assembling in these groups, all religious groups are entitled to the same set of rights as all the others. And so, for example, if they're doing special accommodations for Christian or Jewish groups, or for holidays, they have to make the same accommodation for our Muslim students as any other group, okay? And they have to do that without discrimination or any kind of criticism of the students because of their sincerely held religious beliefs. Just like any other groups, they are free to advertise just as any other groups are, and to organize and to have the MSAs. I will tell you right now, up in Plano, there is an investigation that was initiated by our Attorney General in Texas, Ken Paxton. It has to do with all the Islamophobia that's being ginned up against the EPIC project. And they are actually going in and investigating the MSAs, claiming that they're anti-Semitic. And so we have to be vigilant in making sure, number one, that we know how to push back against that kind of thing. These students have done nothing wrong, the teachers have done nothing wrong, and we will continue to organize. They've brought in a high-powered, national law firm, and we're pushing back against it, and they agree with us. They have to give us these accommodations. Now, what's going to be interesting, for those of you who don't know, the governor has issued an executive order, which basically adopts the IRA definition of anti-Semitism, and that is the International Holocaust Remembrance Association, I believe. They've been pushing this definition for the past at least 2 decades. Part of that is that you cannot criticize the state of Israel, and you cannot criticize America's policy regarding Israel, and it's defined by the statute as in itself being anti-Semitic. And so it's very important that as we move forward, this is another thing we're fighting. CARE has filed a lawsuit against the governor that has to do with our MSA out of University of Houston. We're fighting back against this. This is a clearly unconstitutional, not only definition, but enforcement of this policy. And so inshallah, so far, all the lawsuits we've filed in Texas against the governor and his cohorts, we've won. Because they keep doing unconstitutional things that are targeted against the Muslim community. But we can't do it unless the community tells us that it's going on, meaning they know their rights, they've tried to exercise them, and then they know to call us so that then we can get involved. So be organized, be respectful, and then when all that doesn't work, you contact CARE, okay?
Thank you. One other bucket of school cases that we see is around the area of bullying. So if your child is being bullied for their hijab, their beard, for their religious practices, reach out to CARE and we will send a strong advocacy letter to the administration, to their teachers to take this matter seriously. Because, naturally in schools they're dealing with so much, but when CARE steps in, they're like, okay, time to take this case seriously. So there's no need for your child to suffer unnecessarily because of the way they look, their practices, the way they dress, inshallah. All right, moving on to knowing your rights with law enforcement. So traffic stops. Houston is a huge commuter city, and so there are some wild cases that we see in the news of some rights that are being trampled upon of our fellow citizens. So scenario is as follows. The officer asks, "Sir, have you had anything to drink?" The brother says, "No, I am practicing Muslim. I don't drink or do drugs." The officer then asks, "Can I take a look in your trunk?" And the brother says, "Officer, I do not consent to searches. Officer, am I detained or am I free to go? Officer, I'd like to talk to a lawyer. Otherwise, I am going to remain silent." So these three questions here are very key questions for you all to ask an officer if you feel that there is foul play and unwarranted search happening to you. So a review of the rights to be asserted in such scenarios.
So this is the area that I initially started volunteering with CARE. After 9/11, we had for those of you who are old enough and some of you aren't to remember this, we had an unconstitutional policy of trying to interview Muslim men primarily from Muslim countries between the ages of 18 and 20-something. This is what initially drew me into CARE, and since that time we have been zealously pushing back against discrimination by law enforcement, by the FBI, for their discriminatory tactics against the Muslim community. And for those of you who have not heard me go through all this before, do we have a what to do if they come to the door sliding?
Yeah, there's a next scenario.
Okay. No, that's fine.
Home visits.
I just want to make sure I was about to start going down the wrong path. So as we'll go through this, the thing to remember is that you're number one, you have fundamental constitutional rights that are protected under the Constitution. One of those is the right to remain silent, even though many of us can't. The other is the right to refuse to answer any questions unless you have an attorney present. This is one of the biggest hurdles that we have as a community. I can't tell you how many people I've had come to me after sitting through one of these presentations who then is either pulled over or the police come to the door, and all of a sudden everything we told them during this presentation goes away. They get nervous and they start doing everything we told them not to do. So as we begin this scenario, if you are pulled over by law enforcement, you have the absolute right to remain silent, except you do have to identify yourself. You have to provide your driver's license, insurance. Registration is not something we keep in our cubbies anymore, but anything they need to ask to see that you're legally driving, your driver's license. And then that stop is limited. It's limited to the purpose for the reason they pulled you over. So if they pull you over for speeding, they are there to stop, pull you over, check your identification, make sure you have insurance, admonish you for speeding, give you a ticket, and then you should be on your way, okay? What that means, and sometimes this is a problem, they will give you a ticket and they'll ask you to sign it, okay? You have to sign the ticket. It's not saying you're guilty. It's just a promise to appear in court. You can always go and fight later on at court saying, I didn't run the stop sign, I wasn't speeding. When you're on the street is not the time to do that. As you've seen, there's been a lot of instances around the country of law enforcement getting out of control and doing things they shouldn't do. So your main responsibility at that point is to sign that ticket, and then you should be free to go. Law enforcement cannot detain you after that unless during that time they developed either reasonable suspicion or probable cause that a crime has been committed. Okay, so if they start asking you, can I look in your trunk? The answer is no. You can't look in my trunk. I've done nothing wrong. I've signed the ticket. I know my rights. So if you consent to that, they can search your trunk, right? If you consent to letting them search your briefcases in the car, they can do it. But without your consent and without a warrant, they can't do any of these things. And so remember, you get pulled over. It's for the limited purpose of the traffic stop. You sign the ticket. Anything after that, they have to have legal reasons to detain you. And if they do, don't get smart with them. Don't argue with them. Just tell them, you cannot search my car. You cannot search my briefcase. You cannot look in my trunk. I mean, these are all constitutionally protected rights that you have. And if they do anyways, we can fight that later in court, right? Because then all those things we can keep out of court because they've broken the law. So you have also, if you find an officer who is being difficult, as it says in number 2, someone who's being rude, if they're obviously have an issue with you because of your religious identity, nation of origin, whatever it may be, politely push back. And you can say, I'm sorry, officer, but I'd like to have your name. I would like to have your badge number. If you're not getting any kind of cooperation at that point, you can tell them you'd like to have a supervisor come to the scene. That works, believe it or not, because then they know that you're empowered and you know your rights. Number 3, as I said before, you do not have to answer any other questions without having an attorney present. So if they start asking you other questions, just tell them, officer, I've done nothing wrong. I'm glad to talk to you, but I'm not going to talk to you without a lawyer being present. I add that middle part about I'm glad to talk to you because it seems to be if our Muslim community can't find a way of being nice, they end up talking to the police, right? So just say, I've done nothing wrong. I've got nothing to hide. I'm glad to talk to you. I'm glad to cooperate, but I'm not going to do it without my lawyer, okay? And, of course, as we go through all these frames, remain calm, remain respectful. Never put your hands on a police officer, okay? If they decide that they're going to arrest you and you believe that it's unlawful, you cannot even as much as pull back. So if they put their hands on you, if you even pull back, that's called resisting arrest. And then all of a sudden they've got a new charge. So even if they're arresting you and it's unlawful and you know it's unlawful, just be patient, comply with their orders, and as soon as this interaction is over, you get your family to contact care and then we'll go from there, okay? So don't take it into your own hands. Be respectful, be polite. I'm not going to talk to you without my lawyer being present. Am I free to go is an important question because once that ticket's over, you should be free to go. And if you're free to go, what should you do? Just politely leave, okay? I think we're going to hold the questions till the Q&A, so just so we can run through it. Otherwise, we're going to, thank you, brother.
So this was my care villain story, home visits. So I got visited after I started my Islamic studies journey, and I traveled to Egypt, and then I went to Bayina Institute and Zaytuna College, and I'm around a lot of Muslims. Then I get a call, and then later a visit from law enforcement, from the FBI, not necessarily law enforcement. And I was very lucky to have watched some care trainings to where when they were at the door and they insisted on coming inside, I said, no thanks. No thanks. And I was surprised. I was like, I can do this? I can tell the FBI, no, you can't come in. And lo and behold, that care training saved me from a lot of trouble. So home visits with law enforcement. The scenario is that the law officer says, good evening, son. Is your name Zamis Chaudhry? The brother says, no, I am his roommate. How can I help you? Looks like they come into the house and they meet the brother. Now the brother asks, officer, do you have a warrant? I cannot let you in without a judicial warrant. And so this is kind of an example of what, sort of the search and seizure warrant examples that they might present to you. So the brother says, "Officer, you do not have my permission to continue this search." And he says, "I'm not going to answer questions without my attorney present. My attorney will contact you." So the review of that scenario, there's a lot that happens in between, and it's a very generic situation because a lot happens when law enforcement shows up. The first step is to ask, do they have a search warrant? And if they do, then there are certain things that you can do to protect yourself.
So as we go through this new presentation, there's another version of it where we go through the scenario where the person does everything wrong, and they let the law enforcement officer in, they invite them in. CARE has a funny image that we float around. It says, "No chai for the FBI." All right, and we do that. It's funny, right? But it is significant because what we have found over the past 20 years is that the FBI is trained that the Muslim community is extremely hospitable, and they know to use that paradigm as a way to get into the house and start asking questions. Because once they get into the house, it's very hard as someone who's trying to be polite and hospitable to get them out, right? So then they start asking questions, and then you're in a hot spot. What do I do? How do I get rid of these guys? So that's why this funny thing is no chai for the FBI, because what we found is that they were going to the door, asking to come in. People would allow them to come into the home. They would sit down with the husband or the son, whoever it may be, and next thing you know, auntie's coming in with a tray and giving the FBI chai and snacks. And this was a repeated thing that we saw over and over and over again. So thus, the no chai for the FBI. Where we start with this scenario is that when law enforcement, whether it's local law enforcement or FBI, comes to the door, it is our advice, the brothers, you step outside, shut the door, and then begin your communication with them. They will ask, they'll identify themselves, they'll say they have some questions to ask, and at that point you should tell them, just like we did in the previous scenario. "Officer, can you tell me what this is about?" They might tell you, but you're not answering any questions right. You're going back into the same thing we said before. "I'm glad to talk to you. I've got nothing to hide, but I'm not going to talk to you without a lawyer being present." The FBI, as we've been doing this, I've literally done, last time we counted, over 300 of these encounters with FBI, going to people's door, and it's just an intelligence gathering project. They know that we're here now. Part of the power of having CARE in a community is that they know that when someone from a community steps outside, shuts the door, and says, "I'm glad to talk to you, but I'm not going to talk to you without a lawyer being present," you've been empowered. You know your rights. They have to, at that point, stop questioning you. These are like magic words, right? This is something that the Supreme Court over many, many decades has continued to reinforce, that if they come to the door and you say, "I'm not going to talk to you without my lawyer being present," they have to stop asking questions, okay? So what do we have here? You have the right to remain silent, and you can decline to answer any questions. Do not volunteer any information. You also have a right to a lawyer, and the way to do that is just like we said before. Remain silent. Tell them you're not going to talk to them without a lawyer being present. I know this goes against the grain of anyone who's feeling like, if I don't talk to these guys, they're going to think I've got something to hide, right? Or, I'm going to look guilty, or whatever it may be. It's not your job to be your own attorney when the FBI or law enforcement comes to your door. So don't try to talk your way through it. There's something called Statute 1001, which is a federal statute that makes it a federal felony where you face up to 5 years in federal prison for making a false statement to a federal agent. And so you can see, you got a lot to lose if you talk to these guys, because inevitably people, I'll just use like Martha Stewart's a great example, right? She didn't go to jail for actually the insider trading. They're investigating her out. She went to jail because she thought she could outfox the FBI, and she lied to them. And that's what they got her on, right? So even though you may not have done anything wrong, you've got nothing to hide. If you try to talk your way through this and you say something, they ask you a question that's embarrassing. Maybe something you did 20, 30 years ago. You're like, hey, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to, I'll just tell them something. And all of a sudden, you find yourself in jeopardy. So you have nothing to lose by enforcing your rights and demanding an attorney and remaining silent. On the other hand, you have a lot to lose if you choose to talk to these guys. Remember, they are specially trained to conduct interviews, and they're there for a reason. They're not just coming by to say hello. Okay. Even though they'll say that sometimes. Oh, we're just out in the community trying to say hello, especially with leadership. They want to come out and just make everyone feel like, hey, we want to be friends. They're there for a reason, okay? Unless you meet them out at an event. Let's say the Masjid and has a community event and invites everyone to come, and they come, that's fine. We can talk to them as long as it's a social thing and we're inviting them, right? Or we're calling them. If they come to you and come to your door, you're not to talk to them without it's my advice, you're not to talk to them without a lawyer being present. And just really quickly, since we are in this community, this applies also to your masajid, if they come and want to ask about business records, list of people who come to the mosque, people who attend, people who come and pray, all those things are constitutionally protected. And you should do the same thing then. Don't be shy. Just tell them I'm glad to talk to you. And I'm not going to talk to you without our lawyer being present. I will tell you that all the other religious institutions, all the other religions do this. I had a case once where I was working with one of the prominent, I was involved in a case with one of the prominent big mega churches in Houston. And that's the very first thing they did. When the FBI came to them, the pastor, you've seen from TV, he likes to make jokes before he starts talking. First thing he did is he gave him a big smile and said, I'd love to talk to you, but I'm not going to talk to you without our lawyer being present. And they required that they have a subpoena and that everything be done legitimately. And we can do the same thing, right? Okay.
And just FYI, if you don't have an attorney, CARE is your attorney. You can reach out to us, just have the number, have the website. We are your pro bono, free, legal service provider for the Muslim community. Okay, so moving on to travel, and with being mindful of time and being able to leave time for questions. Travel is a hot topic right now. A lot of asylum cases, a lot of deportations that are happening in the Muslim community all over America. And so to know your rights is to avoid unnecessary trouble in really what is a hot topic right now. And so knowing your rights with the TSA. So the scenario as follows is the TSA officer asks, ma'am, we are short-staffed. We cannot guarantee that you can be patted down by a woman. We can get this over with quickly if you just remove your scarf to make sure there isn't anything in it. So Sister Nada and Brother Abrar are uncomfortable with this, and they politely and respectfully refuse. Let's see. So know your rights.
Welcome. Like I said, take it easy on the brother. So remember, airports are federally funded. They are, their properties are all federally funded, federally controlled. So all of your constitutional rights apply at the airport. Now, they have a right to make sure that everyone who comes into the facility is safe, and everyone who gets on the plane is safe, which means they can conduct reasonable searches. You're all familiar with those. You go through the metal detectors, your luggage goes through the x-ray machines. That's all appropriate. What this scenario was pointing out is that there have been many instances across the country where untrained TSA agents approached sisters wanting to search them, right? And the same thing would apply if they start asking the brothers weird questions about your religious beliefs, what you think about a particular hadith. If you start seeing this kind of stuff, something's gone wrong. They do it too. It's weird. But in particular, in this example, sisters have a right to reasonable accommodations to be searched in a way that is appropriate according to our sincerely held religious beliefs, which means they have their reasonable accommodation to be removed to a private area and to have a female TSA officer conduct whatever kind of search they need to do. Okay, so if you see a male TSA agent trying to search a sister, this means either one of two things. This guy doesn't know what he's doing, he hasn't been trained appropriately, or he's being a bigot and he thinks it's funny. So it's important that as you go, you know this and that you are aware that there are these reasonable accommodations when you go into the airport, okay? And I think that's kind of gets us there. So, and you remember back in the day, for those of you that, there used to be like all kinds of religious groups at the airports when they used to allow people to come inside. There'd be Hare Krishnas and Christians handing out their religious materials. And so the airports have long been held to be a place that are free speech zones almost, right? So things have changed. You know, we have to go through security now. Once you get into security, you know, things are different because of just the safety concerns, but we still have a right to religious accommodations in the airports, okay? You want to move to
Yeah. All right, this is where the presentation falls apart a little bit. I'm looking at the slides, but we'll make it work. So customs and border protection, especially when coming back from travel, it has shown up many times in our caseload. So the scenario is he is being questioned by a TSA officer, and the officer asks, "Tell me about your masjid and the role you have as the emir of the masjid." Per our knowledge, these people were in the same Umrah group as you and your family. Where are they now? Rashid is confused and upset that this is happening to him. He realizes that he has a few options. He can give the CBP officer a piece of his mind. He has heard that several of the brothers at his mosque have been questioned the same way. He wants to tell the officer that he isn't going to play ball. They have no right to ask him these questions, and he isn't going to be set up to be an informant against his community. 2, he can give the CBP officer what they are looking for, provide information about his masjid and some of his other congregants, and share what they were discussing during Umrah, conversations about religion, politics, and living in America. And 3, he can remain silent. He can say, "I respectfully decline to answer that question and would like to speak to a lawyer." So just to do a quick quiz. Who thinks question 1 is correct? Or sorry, answer number 1 is correct. Number 2?
All right, we got it.
Number 3. All right, remain silent. Good. So he says, "I respectfully decline to answer that question and would like to speak to a lawyer." So then the CBP officer plays a little bit hardball and he says, "I'm seizing your phone. Please unlock it." And this is a big one that we're seeing. "Please unlock your phone." The person says, "I will give it to you, but I will not unlock it." And he then goes on and asks, "Please provide me with the badge number of the officer who questioned me and seized my phone, a receipt for my seized phone, and contact information for the agency that seized my phone." So what happens is if they ask to take your phone, you can refuse to unlock it, but they will seize the phone, and then you have to go through a process of getting your phone back. So these are the kind of questions that you should be asking if your phone is seized upon returning to the country. Okay, another scenario is now a CBP officer is asking a sister, "Tell me about your husband's mosque activities. How did your family come in contact with the Umrah travel company?" The sister says, "I respectfully decline and request access to a lawyer." Nada has been subject to wait for around 3 hours because she refused to answer the officer's question. So one of the tactics is to tire out, to frustrate people, and to create all sorts of anxiety in the waiting process. So this is sort of what we are seeing in the community. Another scenario now is, "Tell me about your studies in Egypt and the United States." I was questioned about that myself. "Were you involved in any political activities?" I was there in the summer of 2013. You know that Egypt in 2013 was a very hectic time. Were you involved in any political activities while you were in Egypt, and did you meet up with any activists while you were there visiting family on this recent trip? Abrar, what did you like and dislike about the United States? The sister will answer. How should she answer? She can lie about her activities because there is no way for them to accurately verify what she did or did not do while on vacation in Egypt. They would have to take her at her word. 2, she can exercise her right to remain silent and respectfully decline to answer the question because she knows talking can stop her from walking. And 3, she can be honest and tactful in her answers and share that she joined friends on a humanitarian volunteering work. This one's kind of, but I'm going to go, what's the answer? 2. Abrar was honest and tactful with her answers, but was delayed for several hours. She obtained the officer's badge number, was then free to go. So I'm going to skip over to the review slide.
Am I going? So as Brother Imran was saying, everyone knows this is going on, right? This has been one of the most reported cases that we've had, since the election and the change of the administration. We have seen an extreme uptick in the number of cases that are being reported to CARE about people being harassed at the airport, some being harassed on their way out. If you have like global entry and whatnot, they're starting to use that as a tool to try to get people to talk and to give access to their phones. If you don't, they can revoke your global entry, and so they use that as a tool to try to get access prior to leaving the country. Other than that, they have absolutely no rights to ask you these kinds of questions when you're leaving the country. They have no rights to search you, to search your phone. You should not have to answer any questions when you're leaving the country. On the way back in's a different story. We are getting a lot of harassment. It is a policy now of the of ICE and the TSA, Customs and Border Patrol in particular, that when people are entering the country, they are looking for people it's not just Muslims, right? So we have people who are being profiled now from China, people who are being profiled from black and brown countries that the president has described in awful terms. But primarily for our interest, they are identifying Muslims that have traveled to places that they think are suspicious, meaning Hajj, Umrah. It's unbelievable, but depending on the education level of the person you're encountering, they may find even those kinds of trips as suspicious. They're pulling people aside, and they are being put into secondary questioning and being held for hours. It's not uncommon now for someone who's entering the country to be detained for 3 to 4 hours as they try to encourage you to cooperate. And this is just a tactic. We are advising everyone when they travel to understand their rights, and we've got a whole presentation just on this component because it's become such a hot button issue. We're also encouraging that our imams and our leadership in our masjid participate in this kind of training as well, because they are specifically getting targeted for interviews. But when you enter the country, number one, if you're a U.S. citizen, you can refuse to answer any questions other than those that are necessary to prove your U.S. citizenship. All right, so if you got your passport, your driver's license, they can ask you a couple more questions, maybe just trying to quiz you about your address or, who your wife is, just things to establish, this is me, I'm a U.S. citizen. Other than that, you do not have to answer any questions whatsoever. They have to allow you to enter. You're a U.S. citizen, you've done nothing wrong, they have to allow you to enter. Most people don't understand that, and so while they're in secondary, they start answering all the questions they're not supposed to answer. And then they find out that they're going to be pulled aside for secondary every time they travel, and they're going to continue to ask them questions until they understand how to educate, how to effectuate their rights, okay? So, if you're entering the country, number one, it's the same thing I'm telling you throughout the presentation. I know my rights. I'm a U.S. citizen. I've got nothing to hide. I'm glad to talk to you, but I'm not going to talk to you without a lawyer being present, okay? There is a fiction, all right? It's a legal fiction that well, in the old days it was easy because I'd say stamp your passport, right? But now it's until they scan your passport and you've been entered into the country, your constitutional rights do not actually effectuate, meaning they don't come into play until you've been allowed entry into the U.S. So you're standing there at Houston waiting to get through customs. You don't have the right to a lawyer. You don't have a right to deny search of your luggage or deny search of your phones, okay? But you still have these rights. As a U.S. citizen, you can just tell them, I know my rights. I'm not going to answer any of your questions without a lawyer being present. They will tell you, oh, well, you don't have a right to a lawyer being present. This is a sneaky trick, right? That's true. You don't have a right to a lawyer, but you don't have to answer any of their questions. And so you should be very confident in understanding those rights. And you only have to answer the questions that are necessary to prove you're a U.S. citizen and nothing else. When we get into a different situation is when we're talking about people who are green card holders. They have more rights than people who are visitors. It's touch and go. I mean, they can basically turn you around for almost any reason. But we are advising everyone to exercise their rights as they go through Customs and Border Patrol. As far as devices go, imagine that your cell phone, your laptop, your computers are nothing but a big filing cabinet, for example, or a container. The government, until you've been allowed entry into the country, they have a right to search your luggage, right? We all know that. They also have a right to search your phone until you've entered the country. They have a right to search your laptops. And so it is our advice as a general premise that you refuse to allow them to search your devices. Do not give consent. Once you've given them the consent, they can get into them. There's a warning that comes along with this. If you refuse to give them consent to search your phones, they're going to take them. And you may not get them back for a couple weeks, okay? Because they're going to go search them, and then they'll call you and tell you when they're ready to pick up. So at a national level, CARE's advice, our policy nationwide is we're advising everyone that before you leave the country, you should really consider what's on your phone, all the private information you have in there, your banking, your medical, your family photos. These are all private matters that the government should not be dwelling into, right? So our advice is that when you travel with a travel phone. There's a joke about that. We're not calling it a burner phone, okay? We're calling this a travel phone. Because it's not because you have anything to hide or you've done anything wrong. It's because you want your constitutional rights protected and you want your rights to privacy respected. And we're saying that because once you come back in, unless you want to lose your device for a couple of weeks, you need to be able to give them a clean phone and say, have at it. There's nothing on it, right? We're also encouraging people when they return to the country. If they don't follow that part of the advice and they travel with their primary device, make sure that you have a very long password. Make sure that you understand your rights. And it's our advice that you don't give consent to search, but if you choose to, just know they're going to scan your device. They may make a copy of your device. All your friends are on your WhatsApp group are not going to be happy with you because all those conversations are going to be categorized by the FBI at some point. Your family's photos are going to be seen by the law enforcement. Your banking information could be compromised, all of these things. So kind of the secondary backup advice that we're giving is if you choose to disregard the travel phone advice, seriously consider on your way back to the country removing your apps so that there's nothing on your phone that they can access. Be mindful that the FBI and any law enforcement officer, if they decide that they want to search your device and they want to image it, they can get into your device and they can rebuild whatever you delete. Okay, they've got software. If you think I'm smart, I'm just going to delete all this stuff, they can still rebuild all of it. I'm not telling you to do this because you've done anything wrong or you've got something to hide. I'm telling you to do it because most of us have reasons and things we want to keep private. As a lawyer, I don't want to have my clients' communications compromised, right? Doctors don't want to have their patients' information compromised. All of our business people have business secrets, right, that should remain confidential. So there are many reasons to do this that are legitimate and legal, and you really ought to consider doing this. And if you have any more questions about this, we can talk about it more. But you come back into the country, I'm not going to answer any questions other than those to establish my citizenship. I've done nothing wrong. I got nothing to hide. I'm not going to talk to you without a lawyer being present. They will tell you, like I said before, until you've been allowed into the country, you don't have a right to a lawyer. You can say, that's great. I understand my rights. I'm not going to answer any more questions until I've been admitted to the country. Okay? Did I miss something? Probably not. Let's move on.
And with that, we'll open the floor for questions. Yes, brother.
My question is, I've been hearing this presentation for a long time, mashallah. My only question is, if your record is clean, you're a citizen, you are kind of a law-abiding citizen, why would I have a problem if they want to search my car when it's just a casual stop, or even have the chai with them if they come to my home? Why are you so cautious about it? Unless you have case studies where they're going to plant something in my car or something, that's something different. But I suspect they would get to that degree as such. Can you elaborate a little bit? If you're a citizen, have clean record, and they ask you questions which may seem on the surface very innocent as such.
Yeah. So, I guess what we can do is So, thank you for that, because that illustrates one of the problems that we consistently see. This is the mindset that all of us would have naturally, right? I've done nothing wrong. You can search my car. You can do this. You can do that. Number one, you shouldn't do it because, you know, it is your right as an American to have the same rights as anyone else, right? And you should be empowered in those rights in saying, I'm not going to let you search my car. I'm not going to sit down and ask you any questions. The reason why, there's practical reasons and there are legal reasons. Legal reasons, as I was talking about before. You talk to them, sometimes you may be saying things that you believe are innocent, but they think corroborate some kind of, crime or whatever. And so your words can actually be used against you, and you may be completely innocent and find yourself mixed up in something that is a misunderstanding, or you said something wrong, or whatever it may be. It is always in your best interest not to answer any questions posed by law enforcement until you have a lawyer being present. Because we can talk to them, right? So I can talk to them. I can tell them what you want to tell them, and they can't use that against you. That's hearsay. And so there's a legal reason not to do it. And we talked about the federal statute, which makes it a crime. Let's say, for example, there's a misunderstanding, and you tell them that, oh, no, I'm just making this up, brother. So I've never been in the military before. And they find some record somewhere back when you were, a teenager, that you were temporarily in the military. They can charge you with a felony. And I bring this up as this is a real life example. I had a brother who was asked this question, and he said, no, I've never been in the military before. They charged him with a federal felony. He's facing 5 years in prison. They arrested him, right? So I asked this brother, I said, why did you talk to him? Well, I just wanted, I didn't want him to think I did anything wrong. And I said, well, number two, why did you tell them you'd not been in the military? He said, I didn't want them to keep asking me questions. I thought if I told them I'd been in the military, that they'd just keep harassing me, right? And so this brother found himself in federal court over just a mistake, right? And we see it all the time. Sometimes they'll ask you embarrassing questions, things you may have, like I said before. I don't want to give a lot of personal examples, but we see a lot of times they'll ask you personal questions of things you might have done that you're embarrassed of. And so you're like, I'm not going to admit to that. So you make up a little white lie. Next thing you know, you're in trouble. So there's many reasons not to talk to them. If you allow them to search your car or your home, they can tear it up. And we've seen cars before that they have ripped panels off of, just trash these cars. They've got no respect for your personal belongings or how clean you may want to keep your car. So the bottom line is that there's a lot of reasons not to talk without a lawyer. There's very few that would argue towards talking with them. Final reason, if you start talking to them, you're going to find that they keep coming back to you. We've got people in the community who come, and I can tell you, I'm looking at all of you very closely because we give these presentations, and a year or two later, I'm meeting with some brother, and I say, hey, you look really familiar. He goes, yeah, I saw you when you came out to our Masjid and gave a Know Your Rights presentation. And he proceeds to tell me, I don't know what to do, man. I've been meeting with the FBI once a week for the last 6 weeks, and I keep talking to them, and they keep harassing me, and I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know how to get out of it. And so you got to remember that they are there to gather intelligence, right? And if you start talking to them, you find yourself in that situation where, how do I stop this now, right? Because when do I stop and when do I say enough's enough and not look guilty? So just starting the process is not a good idea, okay?
Any other questions from sisters? Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. Sorry. Brother John, thank you for the presentation. Brother Imran, it was very good. I just wanted to ask how, when we have clients who are reporting an incident, could you talk a little bit about the importance of really being specific on the experience that they went through? Because sometimes clients will come to us and it doesn't quite follow into the 4 buckets that Brother Imran mentioned, and then it's kind of outside of our scope of work. So could you talk about the importance of that, just so we can properly handle their intake and their incident?
So you want to discuss or you want me to start?
No, go ahead.
Thank you, sister. I appreciate what you're doing.
I'll start by answering by saying that we are civil rights exclusively. So a lot of romance gone bad comes to care, and we just politely tell them this is not civil rights, you know. And someone might say in an interracial relationship, it's like, no, they're racist. And I've said sorry, politely, that we have made ourselves available to the community, but not for domestic issues, not for inheritance issues. And so what we do is we have a long list of referrals of attorneys that support work outside of our scope. And so that's something to keep in mind as well.
And yes, sister, so it's very important that we screen the cases as they come in, because number one, you know, we have a particular mission, and that is we are a civil rights and advocacy organization. And we rely on contributions from the community, which in some cases are given as zakat. And so we have to be mindful that the work we do complies with our mission and the intention of the people that are giving the money. And so we have to carefully vet all of the cases that come through to make sure, number one, that they are civil rights cases, or that it fits within our mission as empowering Muslims or enhancing the understanding of Islam. And then, so it's important to get as much information as you can. And then if you're not sure, you consult with one of the other people in the office or in the community to determine whether or not this meets the mission. Most importantly, and this is important because Brother Imran's right, as in any community, there are a lot of people that don't understand what CARE does. There's also a lot of people that have been traumatized. There's a lot of people who have mental illness who sometimes will contact the office. There's a lot of people who, because of what's been going on in the world, the genocide, just their own personal experiences, you know, living in America post 9/11, there's a lot of stress. And so we have a lot of people that come to CARE who do have emotional issues. So it's important that they're all heard, right? So we need to make sure that when people contact the office, they're all heard, they understand that they're heard, that we're compassionate towards them, and if what they do does not fit within the mission of the organization, we find some direction for them. For example, if someone comes into the office with a domestic violence situation, right? That's urgent. We need to do something about that. We take an intake, we talk to them, we hear them out, we find out what the issues are, and then most likely we're gonna refer that case out to one of our sister organizations. We do a lot of work with the NISA Hope Center, for example. And so we're connected with organizations, and when we have something that's outside the mission, we know where to push them. Okay, does that answer your question?
Yeah, and as director, I'm hoping to create a coalition of organizations, ISGH being one of them, that we can leverage, resources and things related to things that ISGH is doing that CARE doesn't do, and vice versa.
And as a disclaimer, I'm on the board of directors for NISA, so that was not a plug, that was an honest suggestion. Yeah. Any others?
Just to follow up on what he was asking earlier, what if somebody consent to come in or search, can you then refuse if they get out of line? You can say, hey, no, I changed my mind. But that's not my main question, but I just want to follow up on that.
The short answer is yes, you can stop the consent at any point, but it's very difficult to do it once it's started.
Okay. So I do a lot of traveling, so I just want to let everybody know that they now are doing these retinal scans, and I tell them every time, I'm just opting out, because they don't want you to know that you can just opt out of these. They just tell you, okay, just go look at the machine, but you can opt out of that, and you can opt out of the body scan too. It's just for those people who didn't know. So when I travel, my concern is when I travel, they may take my phone. I notice, I don't know if this is true. If you have facial recognition or fingerprint recognition, they can access your phone. They can force you to do that, to open the phone. Is that correct? But not if you use a code.
Well, so as far as
let me just, and then the final question is for, if they do take my equipment, my electronic devices, can I have more than one phone and give them the travel phone? Or are they going to know, because when they scan everything, they're going to know how many devices I have, but what if I give them a travel phone and a travel computer? Otherwise, I'm going to have to figure out something else, because I don't want them accessing my data. I know I can put everything in the cloud, but you're saying if I erase everything, they have back doors, they can access. I know, I'm aware of that, so I might just do a throwaway phone.
We're calling it a travel phone.
The first question was about the finger and face recognition.
So as far as giving consent to search your devices, you can refuse to give your fingerprints. You can refuse to allow them to use your facial recognition. I'm glad you brought this up, because one of the pieces of advice we give, and there's a whole list of things that we can talk about at some other point, is to turn off your facial recognition when you enter. Also, to create a password. The last time the experts talked to us, they said to create a password that's more than 14 characters long. I don't know how you'd ever remember that to get back in, but create a password that is extremely long. Don't give consent. The exception would be, what that? Yeah, if you're that smart and you can remember all that. I have a hard time remembering all my kids' birth dates, so. The exception to all of this, okay, we've not touched on, is Imran did show a picture of some warrants earlier. So warrants are judicial orders, okay? So if they come to your house and they've got a warrant to search your house, what we've said about not letting them in doesn't apply. You have to let them in. And it's our advice that if someone comes to your house, they come to your business, they come to the Masjid, if they have a warrant, you have to allow them in, but to immediately contact CARE or your lawyer or whoever it may be, because something's going on, because they've had to convince a judge that there's probable cause, that there's evidence of a criminal offense there. So if they have a warrant, they can search. They can also get a warrant that says they can force the use of your fingerprints or your facial recognition. So they got to get a court order for that. But short of that warrant, they can't do it. So I think that was your first question. So that you're not a lawyer at that point. A lot of times you will not have that option. They will remove you from the premises. They can show you the warrant. You have no rights to sit there and study it and to argue with them about where they can go and where they can't. That's the lawyer's job afterwards. If they violate the terms and conditions of the search warrant, the limitations of the search warrant, that's the lawyer's job later on to go back and say, you violated the court's order, you violated the Constitution, you exceeded the bounds of the search warrant, and all that evidence can be excluded. But it's not your job to do it there, because that's when things can get ugly also. Going back to our thing about not touching an officer, you can't interfere if they're conducting a search warrant. The question about, second question was about the second phone. If they know about any devices, they're going to try to examine all of them. Yeah. So, and if they ask you a question about if you got another device and you lied to them, what have you done? You just made a false statement to a federal investigator and all of a sudden you're in trouble. I mean, it just depending on your circumstances. I mean, we've had, for those of you who travel a lot, and especially to countries where you've been swapping SIM cards all the time, you know, these are things we can do now that will protect your privacy also, right? So you travel with your travel phone, you get a SIM card when you're abroad, you use it when you're abroad, you get rid of the SIM card before you come back, there's nothing on the phone, right? So there are things you can do to protect your privacy that are just common sense. But it's getting very tricky. I will tell you, it's easy for me to say this. I have the same concerns when I'm traveling. It's like, it's really a pain. I gotta go get, you know, I gotta use a clean device. I can't take my phone. I gotta go and reinstall all my apps. But I believe in my privacy. I believe in our privacy as a community and in protecting our constitutional private information. And so it's better to be safe than sorry. Domestically, they have to have a warrant before they can search your devices. What I said earlier about the global entry thing, right? Part of the conditions, and this is something new I didn't know until a couple of months ago, they have been now approaching people who have global entry, even on domestic flights, saying, hey, can I see your phone? The global entry is not a vested right, right? It's something that they have permission to grant you, and they have something, and they can take away. If you refuse to give them your phone to search, they can take it away. Again, that's a choice you'll have to make at that time, but it's really unfortunate. These guys become very tricky about applying the law and trying to search. And the problem is they are searching, as far as the Muslim community, primarily they are searching for people who have stuff on their social media that is contrary to the administration's policy in Gaza. People who are posting protest materials. We've had teachers who all they were doing was saying, you know, pray for the children of Gaza, getting profiled and getting doxxed and getting harassed at the border. So it's not like you've done anything wrong. This is constitutionally protected free speech. Not only should we be doing this, but we have a duty, in my opinion, to be doing it. But the government has used this in a way to characterize the Muslim community as being somehow sympathetic to bad doers, right? And so, you know, if your children are traveling with you, especially your adult children, to me, this is urgent, right? Because you don't want your adult children, all their data being analyzed by the federal government, and then this being used against them in the future, right? So be very careful about this. I'm very concerned about our students. I pray for them. I appreciate what they are doing, because they're doing what a lot of us don't have the guts to do. But at the same token, they're putting themselves on the front lines, and so we need to make sure they're protected as well.
To clarify, if they take my devices, they can go through everything, right? They can hack it if they want,
Sure.
and then they can give it back whenever.
Yes. They're supposed to keep it for a reasonable time so they can do their search. And they can do that within 50 miles of the border, just so you know.
So, last question and then closing comments.
Very good. Thank you, bro.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. My question is going to be really quick. So kind of going back to inviting them into the house, right? No chai for the FBI. So let's say you live with your like spouse or kids or parents or somebody like that. Does anybody, like if any one of them answers the door and invites them in, they can just come inside, or it has to be the person that's okay, so it's anybody. All right.
So anyone who has the appearance of having the ability to give consent. So anyone else who is residing at the home, your parents, your spouse, any other adult who lives there can get consent. Now it's supposed to be limited to the areas that they would have consent to give. So if it's like a roommate, right, who's got a locked, apartment above the garage, they can't give consent to search your home. But anyone inside the home who appears to be someone who has the ability to give consent can give consent. So it's very important when you're educating your family that you make sure they know these rights as well. I can't tell you, we've had a lot of cases over the last year or two where the wives at home have been the first point of contact because they go into the house and they've done this. And alhamdulillah, it's amazing, right? The FBI is getting a civics lesson from a sister who's not even answering the door. You don't even have to answer the door. You can talk to them through your Ring, device and just say, "No, thank you. I'm not going to talk to you without a lawyer being present," and they have to go, right? So it's a very important thing that everyone in the community should understand. Yeah, you don't have to answer it all, but that's true. But then you live with this fear, right? Oh, they're going to come back. Or if you don't answer their phone, oh, they keep calling you, right? So you're like dodging phone calls, you're not answering the door. So in my opinion, it's best just to hit it straight up and say, I know my rights. I'm not going to talk to you without a lawyer being present, and they have to respect that, inshallah. All right, there we go. Closing comments.
Yeah, concluding remarks is Jazakallahu khairan, everyone. I want to congratulate everyone for being proactive in knowing your rights. You don't really need care until you really need care. And so a lot of people who come, it's because they haven't done this proactive work and they've gotten themselves into trouble somehow. So if that happens, still we are here for the community. This QR code will lead to our ticket, like our incident intake form. Our website is carehouston.com. Our website has our phone number on the website as well. You can call us, and inshallah, we will be of service to the community. Our work is funded by the community, and so please, if you find that this is a good cause, that do support us financially, inshallah. And I want to make sure that everybody leaves with a black Know Your Rights booklet. That's the card. Do we have the booklet as well? It's more printing cost, but we want everyone to pick it up. It has a good summary of knowing your rights at school, workplace, while protesting, while traveling, and I feel like every Houston household should have it, inshallah. So it's there for you as a resource. Jazakallahu khairan. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.
Jazakumullah khairan to CARE, to Brother Imran Ghani and Brother John Floyd for being here, and for all of you for participating. Thank you all very much. Be sure to get the QR code and the booklet. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.